Hi, Harry. Thank you again for meeting with me today. Before we start, I just want to give you a heads up on what our meeting is going to look like, structure wise. First of all, we have about an hour and a half today, which should give us ample time to kind of gather some facts, gather the information, and kind of get a gist on how we want to move forward with this. Structure wise, I'm going to be asking you first in a few moments to give me a detailed account of the facts of your case and what's brought you in to come to see me today. And I'm going to try to interrupt you as little as possible, but I will interject at times just for the purposes of clarity and organization of thoughts. I'll be taking notes as well as we go. Also, you can feel free to ask me any questions at any time. I want you to feel like this is a very open process. I want us to have a very open discussion today. After that kind of full account of the story, I'm going to kind of ask you a few questions just to parse through the details of your story. We're going to try to parse through those details topic by topic to stay organized. After we've gathered that more factual information, I'm going to ask you about your goals and interests coming out of this. At that point, we can deal with any other administrative questions you might have. Perhaps if I need to obtain any documents from you, or if we want to schedule another meeting, we can do that at that time. Does that sound okay? Framing scenario one, take two. Hi, Harry. Thank you for meeting with me today. Before we start, I just want to give you a rundown on what our meeting is going to look like. Time wise, I've scheduled about an hour and a half for us, so that should give us ample time to discuss your issues and kind of have a sense of where we're going moving forward. Um, Structure wise, I'm going to first ask you to give me a detailed account of the facts of your case. And at that point, I'm going to be really looking for as much information from you as possible. I'll try to interrupt you as little as possible, but I may interject here and there just for the purposes of clarity and kind of organization. I'm going to be taking notes as well. I might ask you to slow down or anything like that. You can also feel free to ask me any questions at any time during the process. So, after we get that kind of big picture rundown of the story and of the issue that you've come here to deal with today, I'm going to just ask you a few questions to parse through the details of your issue, and we'll try to go topic by topic just to stay organized. After we've gathered that more kind of factual information, I'm going to ask you about your goals and interests coming out of this. And that will just kind of help me prioritize and strategize moving forward, kind of what's important to you and what your values are in this kind of issue. At that point, we can deal with any other administrative questions you might have, and we can organize our next steps. For example, if I need any documentation from you, or if we need to schedule another meeting. Does that sound okay? Framing scenario one, take three. Hi, Harry. Thank you for meeting with me today. Before we start, I just wanted to give you a heads up on what our meeting is going to look like. So, time wise, I've scheduled us in today for about an hour and a half, which should give us ample time to get a sense of the issue that you've come in here for, and perhaps even get a little sense of, what we want to do moving forward. Um, structure wise, at first, I'm going to ask you to give me a detailed account of the facts of your case and what you feel is important for me to know. I'll try to interrupt you as little as possible, but I may interject here and there once in a while, just for purposes of clarity, or maybe just slow down if I'm taking notes, things like that. After that, I'll likely ask you a few more detailed questions just to parse through your issue and go topic by topic in order to stay organized. After we've kind of gone through that more factual information, I'd like to ask you about your goals and interests coming out of this. So that could include, your priorities, your values, things like that, your ideal outcome coming out of this. Um, at that point, we can deal with any other kind of administrative questions you might have, discussing any documents we need to be exchanging, or if we want to schedule a follow up meeting, we'll do that at that time. Does that sound okay? Framing scenario two, take one. Now, I know you spoke on the phone with my paralegal, and she's told me that you're having a dispute with your former neighbor about a boat that belongs to you that your neighbor sold. I'd like you to tell me in your own words what happened, and I'd like as much information as possible. If you think any detail or any event is important, please include it and let me know. And if at any time you're giving me too much detail, for what I need right now in this in the stage of the process, I'll let you know. So you don't have to worry about kind of worrying about what's important to share or what's not important to share. I'd like you to kind of let me know everything. And like I said, if there's anything that's too detailed, I'll let you know. Framing scenario two, take two. Now, I know you spoke with my paralegal on the phone, and he's told me that you've had a dispute with your former neighbor over a boat that you own, and that your former neighbor has sold that boat. I'd like you now to tell me in your own words what happened, and I'd like you to include as much information as possible. If you think any event or detail is important, please just let me know. And if at any time you go into more detail than I require at this phase in the process, don't worry about it. I'll let you know. Framing scenario two, take three. Now, I know you spoke on the phone with my paralegal, and I've been notified that you've had a dispute with your neighbor over a boat that you own, and that your neighbor has sold that boat. Now, I'd like to hear your side of the story. I'd like to hear. I'd like you for you to tell me what happened in your own words. If you think any event or any details important, please let me know. And if at any point you're giving me a little bit more detail than I require at this point in the process, I'll let you know, so you don't have to worry about that. Framing scenario three, take one. So at this time, I'd like to hear a quick summary of the issue that's brought you in today. Don't worry about providing as much detail as possible. This is just for me to kind of get a sense of what's happened. You're also going to have a chance to give me a detailed, thorough account of the issue later in our interview. Framing scenario three, take two. So at this time, I'd like to just have a short summary of the issue that has brought you in today in your own words. Don't worry about providing all the detail you can. This is just for me to get a sense of what's happened. You're also going to have a chance to give me a detailed account of the facts later in the interview process. Framing scenario three, take three. At this time, I'd like to have a short summary of the issue that's brought you in today. Don't worry about going into as much detail as possible. Right now, I'm just trying to get a sense of what's happened. You're also going to have a chance to give me a fully detailed account of the facts later in our interview process. Framing scenario four, take one. So at this time, I'm going to just pause and take a moment to summarize what I've understood from kind of your recount of the story. I just want to make sure that I've understood everything correctly, and just please let me know if I've missed anything. Framing scenario four, take two. So at this time, I want to pause and take a moment and just summarize my understanding of what you've told me. I just want to make sure that I've got everything correct and that everything is accurate. And if I've missed anything or you'd like to add anything, please just let me know. Framing scenario four, take three. So at this time, I want to pause and take a moment just to kind of summarize my understanding of what you've just told me. I think it's very important in order to keep my notes accurate and make sure that I've taken everything down correctly. Please let me know if I've missed anything or if there's anything you'd like to add. Framing scenario five, take one. Now that you've given me a full account of the facts, I'd like to break things down a little further into four topic areas. So this is going to help me organize my notes effectively, and it's also going to give you the opportunity to speak at length on one issue at a time. So these are the four kind of topic areas that I'd like us to discuss moving forward in the interview. So first, I'd like to ask you a few more questions about your boat and trailer. We can discuss, the value when you purchased it, things like that. Second, I'm going to ask you to tell me a little bit more about your relationship with Tori leading up to these events and to the actual sale of the boat. Third, I'd also like to know a little bit more about your medical complications that you referenced. I think that's going to give us some information kind of about context and what was going on in your life at the time that all of this kind of unfolded. And fourth, I'd like to ask you about your goals and interests coming out of this. And I think I've said this before, but I think that's going to give us a really great kind of, it's going to give me a really great picture of how we can strategize moving forward. So, moving into our first topic, please tell me a little bit about your boat and trailer. Framing scenario 5, take 2. So now that you've given me this, full and thorough account of the facts, I'd like to break things down a little bit further into 4 areas. This is going to help me organize my notes effectively. It's also going to give you the opportunity to speak on each topic kind of in an organized way, at length, one at a time. So, our first topic that I'd like to discuss is the boat and trailer. And so that's going to include the value of the boat, kind of how often you used it, things like that. The second thing I'm going to ask you about is your relationship with Tori and kind of what your relationship looked like leading up to the events that have unfolded with regards to the boat and the sale of the boat. The third thing I'd like to know a little bit more about is the medical complications that you've faced over the past few years. I think that's going to give me some information and some context into what was going on in your life before these events unfolded with the boat. And the fourth thing I'm going to ask you about is kind of going to be a discussion on your interests and goals moving forward. So that's going to include your priorities, your values, and kind of what's important to you coming out of this. So, with those 4 topics in mind, I guess we can start now and move into the first topic. So, the first topic being your boat and trailer, I'd like you to tell me a little bit about the boat and trailer. Framing scenario 5, take 3. All right, now that we have a more robust account of the facts from you, I'd like to break things down a little further into four topics. And this is going to help me organize my notes more effectively. It's also going to give you the opportunity to speak to each of these kind of topic areas at length, one at a time. So the first topic is your boat and trailer. I think we'll have a discussion on that value and its significance. Second, I'm going to ask you to tell me a little bit more about your friendship, your long-term friendship with Tori Nato and what it looked like. Third, I'd like to know a little bit more about the medical complications that you faced leading up to the sale of the boat. And fourth, I'd like to ask you to talk a little bit about your interests and goals coming out of this and kind of what your priorities are. Framing scenario 6, take 1. Thank you for that. I'd like to just take a moment to make sure I understood everything correctly. And I'd like to summarize the details that you've given me about the boat. Its value, both monetary and sentimental, and when you purchased the boat and how often you used it. And please feel free to let me know if I'm missing anything. Framing scenario 6, take 2. Thank you for that, Harry. I'd like to now just pause and take a moment just to summarize the details that you've given me about the boat. I'd like to summarize, we talked about its value, both monetary and sentimental, when you purchased it, how often you used it. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to just summarize what you've said, and please feel free to let me know if I've missed anything. Framing scenario 6, take 3. Thank you for that, Harry. I'd just like to take a moment now and summarize what you've told me about the boat, about its value, both monetary and sentimental, as well as when you purchased the boat and how often you used it. And so please feel free to let me know if I've missed anything or if you'd like to add anything. Framing scenario 7, take 1. Okay, Harry, now that we've completed our discussion on the boat and the trailer itself or themselves, I'd like to now get into our second topic, your relationship with your former neighbor. And on that note, I'm going to ask you to please go ahead and tell me about your relationship with Tori over the years. Framing scenario 7, take 2. Okay, Harry, now that we have completed our discussion on the boat itself, I'd like to move into our next topic, which is your relationship with Tori. So please go ahead and tell me a little bit about your relationship with Tori leading up to you finding out that he sold your boat. Framing scenario 7, take 3. Okay, great. Thank you, Harry. Now that we've completed our discussion on the boat itself, I'd like to move into our second topic, which is going to be your relationship with Tori. Please go ahead and tell me a little bit about your relationship leading up to you finding out that Tori had sold your boat. Framing scenario 8, take 1. Thank you for those details, Harry. I'm sure it's been difficult having, this long-term friendship with Tori break down. And I just want to take this moment right now just to summarize what you've told me about your relationship with Tori, just to ensure that I haven't missed anything. If there is anything that I did miss, or if there's anything else that you feel is important that you would like to add, please just let me know. Framing scenario 8, take 2. Thank you for sharing those details with me, Harry. I'm sure it hasn't been easy having a long-term friendship like yours and Tori's break down so suddenly. And I know you've expressed that you feel betrayed, and I can definitely empathize with that. I'm going to take this moment now, and I'd like to summarize what you've told me about the relationship that you two had, just to ensure that I haven't missed anything. And if there is anything that I did miss or anything that you would like to add, please just let me know. Framing scenario 8, take 3. Thank you, Harry, for sharing those details with me. I know it hasn't been I know it has been difficult for you, having a long-term relationship, a long-term friendship breakdown with Tori. I'm going to take this moment right now to summarize what you've told me in order to ensure that I haven't missed anything. And if I have missed anything or you would like to add anything, just let me know. Framing scenario 9, take 1. Before we move on to talk about your medical complications, which is the third topic we wanted to talk about, I just want to know if there's anything else that might be important for me to know about you and Tori's relationship and friendship thus far. Framing scenario 9, take 2. Now, before we move on to talk about your medical complications, is there anything else you think might be important for me to know about your friendship with Tori thus far? Framing scenario 9, take 3. Before we move on to talk about your medical complications, I'd just like to know if there's anything else that you feel is important for me to know about your friendship with Tori thus far. Framing scenario 10, take 1. Now that I've learned everything that I need to know about the relationship between you and Tori, I'd like to shift gears a little bit and move into our third topic, as we discussed, which is your medical complications. So I know this is probably difficult. You've been dealing with a lot of stress, but I'd like you to tell me a little bit about the medical issues you've faced over the past 3 years. Framing scenario 10, take 2. Okay, Harry. So now that I've learned everything I need to know about the relationship between you and Tori, I'd like to switch gears a little bit and move into our third topic and talk about your medical complications. So, on that note, can you tell me a little bit about the medical issues that you've faced over the past 3 years? Framing scenario 10, take 3. Okay, Harry, now that we've discussed your relationship with Tori at length and kind of we know everything we need to know about that, I'd like to shift gears a little bit and start discussing your medical complications. And I know that must, bring on a little bit of stress. I can definitely understand that. But I'd like to just get some context about kind of what was happening in your health in the lead up to the sale of the boat and you finding out that the boat had been sold. So on that note, tell me a little bit about the medical issues that you've faced over the past 3 years. Framing scenario 11, take one. Okay, so at this time, we've been at this for a little while, and I just want to take a moment just to situate us in the progress of our interview. So the first thing we did was kind of a full and thorough account of the facts, an account of the issue that had happened. And then we determined and agreed that we would go through four topics more extensively. And the four topics were in order. So, first was your boat and the trailer. We discussed their value and things like that. The second thing was your relationship with Tori leading up to the events of, the sale of the boat and you finding out that the boat had been sold a couple months later. The third topic that we kind of touched on and discussed was your medical complications, which we are, just finishing discussing now. And finally, the final and next topic is a discussion on your goals and interests moving forward. Framing scenario 11, take two. Okay, so now that we've kind of, been talking for a little bit, I just want to make sure that we situate ourselves in the progress of our interview right now. So, as you'll recall, we initially kind of the first thing we did was go through and get a full and thorough account of the facts in your own words. We did that. And then in the second portion of the interview, we're kind of parsing through four other topic areas or details, within the grander narrative that we had. So the four topics were first, your boat, which we discussed. Second, your relationship with Tori, which we've discussed. Third, your medical complications, which we are currently discussing or currently wrapping up. And finally, and the kind of next topic we're going to be discussing is your goals and interests moving forward. Framing scenario 11, take three. Okay, Harry, so we've been at this for a little while. I just want to kind of situate us in the progress of our interview. So, the first thing we did was, we had a full and thorough account of the facts from you in your own words. Then, second, we went back and parsed through four separate topic areas. Or, sorry, we agreed that we would parse through four separate topic areas. And so the first topic area was the boat, which we have, completed our discussion on. The second was your relationship with Tori, which we've completed the discussion on. The third thing that we said we would discuss is your medical complications, which we are currently discussing and wrapping up. And finally, fourth, and the next thing we are going to be discussing is kind of your goals and interests moving forward. Framing scenario 12, take one. Thank you for sharing those details with me, Harry. I can only imagine the stress that you were under while facing those medical issues and also having the stress of this dispute on your shoulders. I'm very sorry to hear that you've, been through all of that. Now that I've got kind of a better picture of the medical complications you experienced, I'd like to move on to our fourth topic, your goals and interests. So, this is going to help me understand how we should shape our strategy moving forward and how I should be framing your framing your priorities in this process. So, on that note, what are your goals moving forward from today on this matter? Framing scenario 12, take two. Thank you so much for sharing those details with me, Harry. I can only imagine the stress that you were under while facing those medical issues and also dealing with the stress of this dispute. I really can understand how difficult that must have been for you. Um, Now that I've got a better picture of your medical complications and what you've experienced, I'd like to move on to our fourth topic, and I'd like to have a discussion on your goals and interests. And this is really going to help me understand how I need to shape our strategy moving forward and how we need to frame your priorities in this process. So, that being said, what are your goals moving forward today on this matter? Framing scenario 12, take three. Thank you so much, Harry, for sharing those details with me. I know that must have been very difficult to go through, facing medical issues, having the stress of this dispute on your shoulders. It must have been a really difficult time for you. And I really appreciate you sharing all of this with me. Um, and so now that we have kind of a better picture, I have a better picture of the medical complications that you experienced over the past few years. I'd like to move on to our fourth topic, so namely your goals and interests. And this is really important in order for me to understand how we need to shape your strategy and how we should frame your priorities throughout this process. So, on that note, I'd like to ask you, what are your goals moving forward from this matter today? Frame 13, take one. Okay, now is there anything else that is important to you that you'd like to share as a goal or a value moving forward in the process that you think I should know? Framing scenario 13, take two. Okay, thanks, Harry. I just want to make sure, is there anything else that you feel is important to you that you'd like to share with me as a goal or a priority throughout this process? Framing scenario 13, take three. Okay, thanks, Harry. I just want to make sure that is there anything else that you feel is important that you'd like to share with me as a goal, an interest, a priority, or value of yours moving forward in this process? Framing scenario 14, take one. Okay, I hear you, Harry. Yeah, your concerns about the cost of litigation are well taken, and that's going to be a really important discussion for you and I to have once the strategizing phase comes into play a little bit down the line in this process. For now, it's really important that I still try to gather as much information as possible in order to strategize in that way down the line. So, on that note, right now, did you have any other goals other than retrieving the value of the boat from Tori? Framing scenario 14, take two. Harry, I hear you. Your concerns about the cost of litigation are well taken. And that's going to be a really important discussion for you and I to have once we get into that strategizing phase, which is going to come a little bit down the line. For right now, it's important that I still try to gather as much information as possible in order to strategize in that way down the line. So for right now, what's going to be really helpful is if you can let me know if you have any other goals other than retrieving the value of the boat from Tori. Framing scenario 14, take three. Harry, your concerns about the cost of litigation are well taken, and I can completely understand why that's something you're worried about. That's going to be an important discussion for you and I to have once we're kind of down the line in our strategizing phase. For right now, it's really important that I gather as much information as possible in order to be able to strategize in that way that you're suggesting down the line. So, on that note, did you have any other goals other than retrieving the value of the boat from Tori?